Formula One drivers have reportedly made a shocking announcement after the Hungarian Grand Prix, and the pressure is now aimed directly at the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. The first reports appeared on July 27, 2026, with another linked report emerging only hours ago, but the most important detail is still missing. The available source does not reveal which drivers spoke, what they announced, or exactly why the governing body is now facing huge problems. And that mystery changes everything. Because when multiple Formula One drivers take a public stand, the issue is rarely limited to one result. It can expose frustration over safety, penalties, racing rules, or a deeper loss of trust between the grid and the people controlling the sport. Whatever was said after Hungary was powerful enough to trigger immediate controversy. But before anyone chooses a side, one question must be answered. What did the drivers reveal that placed the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile under this much pressure? Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this could become a major problem for the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, you first have to understand what happens when drivers stop complaining individually and start speaking as a group. One driver can be dismissed as frustrated. Two drivers can be described as emotional. But when several drivers appear to share the same concern, the issue becomes much harder to ignore. Because Formula One drivers rarely agree on everything. They compete for the same points. They defend different teams. They have different interests, different contracts, and completely different pressures. So when their voices begin pointing in the same direction, the governing body has to listen. And that is where the Hungarian Grand Prix becomes important. The available source links the story to reports published shortly after Hungary, including one dated July 27, 2026. But it does not provide the names of the drivers, their exact announcement, or the specific issue they raised. That means the reaction is presented as significant. The details behind it are not. And those missing details matter because a driver announcement can mean several very different things. It could be a demand for clearer rules. It could be a concern about safety. It could be frustration over penalties. It could be criticism of racing standards. Or it could involve something much bigger, a breakdown in trust between the drivers and the organization responsible for controlling the sport. The source does not confirm which of those possibilities is correct. But if the announcement truly created huge problems for the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, then the issue was probably not limited to one bad result. It would have to affect the way drivers believe Formula One is being managed. And that changes the scale of the story. Drivers can accept disappointment. They can accept losing positions. They can accept that officials will sometimes make decisions they dislike. What they struggle to accept is uncertainty. Uncertainty about what is legal. Uncertainty about what is safe. Uncertainty about whether the same rule will be applied in the same way at the next race. That kind of uncertainty follows a driver into the cockpit. It changes how aggressively he attacks. It changes how much space he leaves. It changes whether he trusts the instructions coming from race control. And when trust begins to disappear, the problem moves beyond public criticism. It reaches the racing itself. Think of playing a game where the rules are clear before the start, but seem different after every major moment. At first, the players argue. Then they become cautious. Eventually, they stop believing the result is completely in their hands. That is the danger Formula One faces whenever drivers believe the system around them is unpredictable. The cars may still be fast. The racing may still look dramatic. But beneath the surface, confidence begins to crack. And once that happens, every future decision becomes more difficult. A penalty is no longer judged on its own. It is compared with every previous penalty. A safety call is no longer accepted immediately. Drivers begin asking whether the same standard was used before. A racing incident becomes part of a much larger argument. That is how one announcement can create pressure that lasts for weeks. But here is the deeper problem. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is not only responsible for making decisions, it is responsible for making those decisions understandable. Drivers need to know why a penalty was issued. teams need to know which regulation was applied. Fans need to understand why the official result changed or why an incident was treated differently from another. Without that explanation, even a correct ruling can look suspicious. And suspicion spreads quickly in Formula One. One team questions the decision. Another team brings up an old example. A driver compares two incidents. Fans choose sides. Soon, the original problem becomes almost impossible to separate from the reaction around it. This is why the exact words from the drivers matter so much. Did they announce that they wanted change? Did they demand answers? Did they reveal that private discussions had already failed? Or did they simply express anger after a difficult race? Those are completely different situations. One may disappear before the next Grand Prix. Another could force formal meetings, new guidance, or a public response from the governing body. The attached source does not provide enough information to tell us which one happened. But the timing gives the story weight. Comments made immediately after Hungary would come while the pressure was still fresh. Drivers would still remember every battle, every instruction, every moment when they believed the rules helped them, hurt them, or failed to protect them. That can produce emotional language, but it can also produce honesty. Sometimes drivers say more in the minutes after a race than they would after a week of preparation. The anger is raw. The frustration is visible, and the message can reveal what has been building privately for much longer. That may be the most important possibility here. Hungary may not have created the problem. It may have exposed it. A disagreement could have existed for several races. A safety concern could have been raised before. A request for clarification could have gone unanswered. Then one moment in Hungary may have pushed the drivers beyond patience. Again, the source does not confirm the sequence, but it explains why a post-race announcement could feel much larger than one incident. Public criticism often appears at the end of a process, not the beginning. Before drivers speak openly, there are usually private conversations, meetings, messages, requests for answers, attempts to solve the issue away from cameras. If those attempts fail, the public statement becomes the next step. And when that happens, the pressure on the governing body increases immediately. Because now the problem is visible. It cannot be managed quietly. It cannot be delayed without creating more questions. The response matters almost as much as the original announcement. A clear explanation can calm the situation. A weak explanation can make it worse. Silence can make drivers believe they are being ignored. A defensive response can turn frustration into open conflict. And an inconsistent response can damage trust even further. That is why the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile could face huge problems even before the full details become public. The issue is not only what the drivers announced, it is whether the sport can answer them convincingly. And this is where the stakes begin to rise. Because drivers are not ordinary employees speaking from the outside, they are the people taking the physical risk. They feel the car move beneath them. They know when visibility disappears. They know when another driver leaves enough space. They know when a rule sounds clear in a meeting but becomes confusing at racing speed. Their view is not always perfect. They are competitors. They protect their own interests. They can be emotional. But their experience carries weight that cannot be replaced by a document. If several drivers believe something is wrong, the governing body cannot simply treat the criticism as noise. It has to determine whether the concern is personal, political, or genuinely structural. And that distinction is crucial. A personal complaint can be answered. A political disagreement can be negotiated. A structural problem requires change. That is the question hanging over this story. Were the drivers reacting to one decision after the Hungarian Grand Prix? Or were they revealing that confidence in the system had already begun to collapse? Because if it was one decision, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile may still contain the controversy. But if it was a loss of trust, Hungary may have been only the beginning. And this is where the situation becomes much more dangerous for the governing body. Because once drivers begin questioning the system publicly, the issue is no longer contained inside one meeting room. It moves into every garage, every media session, every future driver's briefing. And every decision made after that point is examined with greater suspicion. A normal ruling can suddenly feel political. A routine explanation can sound defensive. Even silence can be interpreted as proof that the driver's concerns are not being taken seriously. That is how pressure multiplies. Not because one announcement changes the sport overnight, because it changes how every later action is understood. The available source still does not reveal what the drivers announced after Hungary. It does not provide their names, direct quotations, or the specific complaint placed before the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. So the exact conflict cannot be stated as fact. But the central framing suggests a serious confrontation. And if the announcement involved shared criticism, the governing body would face a problem that cannot be solved with one short statement. The drivers would want clarity. The teams would want consistency. The public would want proof that the concern had been heard. Those three demands can pull the organization in different directions. A quick answer may calm the public, but fail to address the technical details. A long investigation may produce a better answer, but allow anger to grow. A private response may satisfy some drivers, while leaving fans convinced that nothing has changed. There is no simple option, and this is where leadership becomes visible. Anyone can enforce a rule when nobody objects. The real test comes when the people taking the greatest risks say the rule, the process, or the outcome no longer makes sense. At that moment, authority alone is not enough. The explanation has to be stronger than the anger. That is difficult in Formula One because drivers do not experience decisions as abstract regulations. They experience them through consequences. A lost position, a damaged car, a missed opportunity, a moment of danger. An official may describe an incident in calm, formal language. The driver remembers the steering wheel moving in his hands, the rear of the car stepping away, another machine arriving at enormous speed. The two perspectives are not automatically enemies, but they are very different. And when communication fails, that difference becomes a fracture. The governing body may believe it has followed the correct procedure. The drivers may believe the procedure failed to understand what actually happened. Both sides can feel certain. Both sides can believe they are protecting the sport. And that is when the argument becomes hardest to resolve. Because the disagreement is no longer about one fact. It is about whose experience carries more weight. The written regulation, or the reality inside the cockpit. The answer has to involve both. Rules without driver experience can become detached from racing. Driver emotion without consistent rules can create chaos. Formula One needs the regulation and the reality to support each other. If they begin moving apart, every incident becomes a test of trust. And Hungary may have created exactly that test. Not necessarily because the race produced the worst controversy Formula One has ever seen. The source does not provide enough information to claim that, but because the reaction was framed as a shocking announcement with huge consequences for the governing body. That language suggests the drivers may have moved beyond ordinary frustration. They may have tried to force a response. And when drivers try to force a response, it usually means they no longer believe waiting quietly will solve the problem. That is a major shift. Private concerns protect relationships. Public concerns create pressure. Once the issue becomes public, every side has an audience. Drivers know fans are listening. Teams know sponsors are watching. Officials know the credibility of the sport is being judged. That audience changes behavior. People become more careful, more defensive, sometimes more aggressive. a team principal may support a driver publicly, even while negotiating privately.